Hello, I'm Dr. Tom Herzog, and it's a pleasure to bring to you the second installment, if you will, with Dr. Destin Black and Carrie Kay. And what we're going to talk about on this installment is a follow-up of our first installment of the series of videos for education on how to create a culture of research and enrollment. And in the first installment, we really focused on how to build that culture. How do you establish a culture of research in a new center? And what are some of the things you need to do from the get-go to try to get that going? On the second installment, what we're really interested in is trying to understand how you build it, how do you keep it strong, and how do you really grow it to the future, right-size it, and all those good things. So what I thought I'd kick off with is, once you get that culture established, where do you go next to ensure that you're going to keep that culture alive? And sometimes these cultural changes can be quite temporary if you don't do some things to try to instill that and give roots to the behaviors and so forth. So a little bit behavior modification, establishing expectations, all those things. How do you build your infrastructure in terms of maintaining employees once you get good people? Obviously, turnover is a big problem in most cancer clinical trial offices. So how do you work around that? Do you have a pipeline? Do you just overpay people to keep them? What do you do? So let's kick that off, and whoever wants to field that, maybe introduce yourselves real quickly as well.
I'm Destin Black. I'm a gynecologic oncologist in North Louisiana, and I have a sort of a hybrid practice. I work at a nonprofit community type hospital and I also work with a medical school at LSU in Shreveport. So we've been successful with our clinical program for about 3 years, and we're still growing and learning, and certainly how to get the culture right is so important, but also in terms of the infrastructure, creating that structure that can continue to grow is pretty complex, but it's definitely doable. But for me, I can talk a little bit maybe about the enrollment of how we consistently enroll patients. For one, when I first see patients, I start talking about the importance of clinical research. I'm collaborating a lot with other sub-PIs, and we're literally on the phone really every day talking about potential candidates for a clinical trial. I think that really keeps the momentum going. It keeps everyone engaged in this. In terms of all the nuts and bolts, I think Carrie can kind of help a little bit with that because she's behind the scenes doing a ton of work. And we are in communication every day as well. But we also have weekly meetings, even if it's just for a few minutes on Zoom. We just set it up simple, and we have an administrator at those meetings to help make sure we have the support we need. As we've grown, we've had to hire new people. What do you want to say about that part?
So bidirectional communication is really a big
Absolutely.
part.
Absolutely.
I think with us, we're still work in progress because our program has grown substantially over the last 3 years. The one good thing I'll say about COVID is it has definitely brought in awareness to clinical trials. And from a patient perspective, as well as physicians. I have physicians now that were never interested, and all of a sudden research is cool and they'd love to be part of studies now. So that's been a very good problem for us, but it's been a very big challenge as well because we're being, inundated with the potential of doing studies, and we need to be able to have the qualified personnel to be able to run the trials. Unfortunately, there is a large turnover in clinical research. What we have found and what we have been trying to work on the last several months is being able to have a program that will incentivize the correct staff to look at our nurses. It's not just RNs or LPNs, but to look at our research nurses as specialty nurses and to compensate them appropriately for that, because it is a very different type of nursing than anything else you're going to see. Being able to get them into our department and getting them trained is probably the biggest obstacle I'm encountering right now, because we do have a department with a lot of new staff. And it's a challenge to be able to train them on protocols at the same time as you're busy and trying to make sure your data is accurate and that you're also being able to enroll at a steady pace. So that's definitely work in progress for us. I would love to see, programs around that would be available through some type of organization to help train coordinators. And that's something that I think, very much lacking. But being able to get the staff in there, to retain the staff, being able to troubleshoot things. I mean, even like just recently, we had an issue with the pharmacy because they're understaffed. Well, let's find out what we can do for the pharmacy to be able to help them facilitate clinical trials. What do you need from me? And then kind of take those needs back to administration and say, hey, okay, this is what we need to be able to go forward and have all these, ancillary departments being able to support the studies. And so that's something that we've been pretty successful in, basically just being able to have open communication with anybody that provides any type of service to our department. And there's a lot of different people, and be able to provide them some resources as well to be able to support us.
I think one of the things that helps us is that we are a smaller hospital system, and so we are able to call our administrator, and we are able to have these meetings, and we know the pharmacist. It's very small setting, and we can open trials pretty quickly. We don't have a lot of red tape, sort of say, in terms of getting people together and making things happen. And plus, we're really, really persistent.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? Inspiration and perspiration. So, I think you brought up a good point. You start getting people to think of research as cool, and that is the building the culture, right? Because now you've got people that want to be involved in a winning organization, a winning group. I think also you brought up a good point of how you ensure quality. And that's a challenge, right? Because you're getting bigger, you're getting busier, and it's easier to have slip-ups because you have more inexperienced people, perhaps at some of the touch points, different disease sites and whatnot. So you're basically training people while or building the plane while you're flying.
Yeah.
Real problem that people have. So first of all, how do you ensure quality continues? Because obviously, enrolling a lot of people, but having major protocol deviations every day isn't ideal either. So how do you deal with that? Because it's not easy, right? It's the way protocols are written these days. It's so complicated. Yeah. I know how easy it is to get a protocol deviation.
The most simplistic way I can say it is I micromanage. I do. At this point, I have to be able to ensure the data. I micromanage with the hope that at one point I'll be able to get, enough staff up and trained to where, there'll be more of a resource for each other. One of the things that we really try hard to do, and I've been doing clinical trials for about 25 years, and I've done this my whole entire career. We always have two coordinators, have two sets of eyes on everything. And that way, you're having someone else look at your records before your monitor comes out. And it's a good way to be able to troubleshoot problems before you see a trend. And it's also a way that you can correct issues, before your monitor comes out, because, most of the time there's a lag, especially now post-COVID, there's huge lags if you ever even get a monitor to come out to your site. Everything's remote right now. And that makes it really difficult, and it also makes, kind of makes you a little insecure, because I personally like to have someone look at my records and to give me that assurance that we're doing everything appropriate. We also try to build as many tools as we can. We create all kinds of source worksheets and things to where if you can check a box, and you check all the boxes, then you've completed the visit and you've done everything that you're supposed to do. So I spend a lot of time making tools that's just as a resource for the staff, and that seems to be pretty helpful.
Great. So redundancy, it's like proofreading your own paper, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll miss it. You read it 17 times.
And you still find errors.
Right. It looks at it the first time and they go, well, you spelled your name wrong. So, and redundancy is really important also, so that the whole enterprise isn't shut down if one of your research coordinators is going off to medical school or whatever it may be, that you don't, the whole enterprise isn't shut down in that disease area. And then you brought up checklists. And so how do you go about developing those for a particular trial?
Typically, when I get a protocol in, I'll, obviously I go through and I read the protocol. I'll look at the CRF guidelines as well as the protocol grid of assessments. And I use those and I do a first draft. And I tell all the coordinators that, that first draft is just that, it's a draft. We're not positive until we've actually done that first visit that tool is reliable. But then after we've done that first patient, that first visit, we tweak it around, we make it flow better. If there's anything that they would like to be, in a different spot just to make that visit go quicker or to a little bit more accessible, we'll do a second draft at that point. And then it should be a valid document. At that point, you should be able to pull that document and do that visit with no questions asked. And then we do the same thing as the protocols are amended. We'll do revisions and go through that. But it really does help when you have those in front of you. It never fails. Like today, we had 3 patients scheduled, and we had a 4th patient show up that had gotten moved at 4:00 yesterday, and we were never notified. So you need to be able and be prepared to jump and run and not have to be scrambling around and make sure you know what you're going to do at that visit. So it's very helpful.
Great. Thank you. Destin, so is it more fun to establish this culture of research, or is it more fun to grow it and sort of optimize it? And maybe you can turn that around. And what's the bigger challenge of the two?
I think that the challenges are definitely different. They're unique challenges to each part of it. I thought it was really fun to start it and to grow it. It has been a challenge, but it's still fun. I feel like it's never ending, the potential that we have for our patients, especially our patients with, where there's such an unmet need, like our advanced cervical cancer patients, or, some of these patients have really very limited resources, and it's not only fun, but it's rewarding. That these patients would not be able to travel to get a clinical trial. And so that, to me, at the end of the day, it's been really the best part of it. It's bringing it to your patients, Yeah. But the process has been incredibly fun and really challenging. And I love the new challenge of it. I've learned a ton about the hospital system, my administrators, all the pieces and parts of how a hospital works. We've had to work with HR, we've had to work with finance, we've worked with pharmacy, we've worked with,
legal,
every level of the hospital. We have, it got, at one point I put a PowerPoint together and presented it to a person from every division in the hospital of administrators. Incredible. Just to, sell it to them, really. Yeah. So
I don't think people realize the touch points that need to be made to get a trial open at an institution. It really is quite amazing. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your IRB, and is that a big hurdle for you?
So we actually have a local IRB, but they've made the decision about 4 years ago that they will actually defer approval for any type of outpatient trials. So the only time we utilize them if it's an investigator-initiated study that doesn't have a grant, or if it's an inpatient study. So for the majority of the gynoc studies we utilize essential IRBs, which is a huge asset to us. We can have a study up and running in 4 weeks. And the longest thing with that is the contract process. Where if we had to try to prepare documents and get everything submitted to a local IRB, it's at least a 6-week to 8-week headway. And then that's if we were able to get to it almost immediately upon being approved for the protocol. So that's a huge asset to us, and that is something that our institution has. They heard us. They heard us when we said that we needed to have that ability to be competitive. And it took a lot of convincing. But once we put some parameters in place where we're able to prove to them that we are using reputable IRBs that have all the checks and balances in place, We do like an annual review of our IRBs, and just a lot of little things that we have put in place to where if Joint Commission comes in, that we still show that the institution has oversight and the institution is aware of what's going on with our patients. But it's a huge asset to be able to move faster and a little bit more efficiently.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we're up on the clock here, but I want to thank both of you so much for really telling us how you're able to grow a successful program after establishing it. And I think that you both really epitomize what we're looking for in mentors. And
Thanks, Tom.
we'll take you up. Katie Moore, my co-associate director, and I are always talking about putting together a course for how to teach clinical research coordinators and everything else. So
that'd be fabulous.
You two may have just been told that you're going to be involved. So
fun! That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So Dr. Destin Black, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Absolutely, great seeing you again, Carrie Kay. The only thing I can say, Destin, is that don't let her answer any outside calls.
I'm not. You can't leave me. No.
So thank you so much, and thanks for joining us on this educational series on how to create a culture of research and enrollment. On behalf of GOG Partners, thank you.
Happy to help. Thank you so much.
You.
Have a good one.
Thank you.